What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News. I am your host, Emma Lingan. I am joined today by Michael Augello and Adam Kierszenblat of the Hockey News in this first, full official week of the new year. We've got lots to talk about here, from stories around the NHL. But before we do, I want to remind you that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com and get in on the action. All right, first up, guys, we got to talk about Alexander Wennberg. He signed a 3-year, $18 million extension, so $6 million per year, with the San Jose Sharks over the weekend. Wennberg, 31 years old. He's got 7 goals, 26 points in 41 games this season with San Jose. So the Sharks are a rebuilding team and have been for the last few years. And they, you would think they would typically look to trade away an older pending free agent, kind of like Wennberg. So, Mike, do you think this deal shows that the Sharks and Mike Grier think that, the team is actually close to contending now?
Well, I think he thinks that they're improving, and they are, and they've got young cornerstone players like Will Smith, like Macklin Celebrini. But if you look at their cap situation, they're very clean other than Tyler Toffoli, and they extended William Eklund. Past 2 years from now, they have nobody on the books. I mean, they're going to have to sign their, Celebrini and Smith and Dickinson and some of their young players to extensions, but they really have nobody signed past 2027. So to give Wennberg, and I think it was a slight overpay. I think he's a decent forward, but I don't think he's a $6 million forward. They can do it. I think there were a lot of general managers around the league that were like raising their fist at Mike Grier, because now he's sort of set the market for a 30s veteran forward, and that's a price that a lot of other teams aren't going to be willing to pay.
Yeah, Adam, what do you think that this deal means for not only for the Sharks and their trajectory, but also for the forward market, like Mike said?
Well, I think it just shows kind of how the cap is rising, and how valuable centers are, because Wennberg is a third line center. He might be a second line center on a team that's not in the playoffs, but if you look at just kind of what he's able to produce, he's a third line center. And I mean, $6 million might be the new $3 million contract at this point, especially with centers. We saw what happened in Philadelphia yesterday with Dvorak. Contracts are going to look a little bit silly, but also, to Mike's point about the cap with the Sharks, I was looking at this the other day. I think the Sharks have 3 defensemen signed past this season, and one of them is Ryan Ellis, who isn't even playing. They're going to have so much cap space, and I think that part of this is A, getting to the cap floor, and B, when you have a young team, you still need experienced players. There's a lot of people who say a rebuild should be nothing but anybody under 25. That just doesn't work in reality. You need those players like Tyler Toffoli, like an Alex Wennberg, that could kind of lead these players. You don't want Macklin Celebrini or Will Smith going out in the media every single day. So having those kind of buffers really does help and lets them learn how to be NHLers. So, I mean, if you're talking about on ice, it's a little bit of an overpay, but there's other dynamics that play into this that could make the deal at least an okay deal by the end of it.
All right. Well, Mike, we talked about last week on the show, we were talking about, looking ahead to the new year, obviously starting fresh in 2026. One of the guys that I know we had talked about quite a bit in terms of guys who have a lot to prove in the year 2026 is Auston Matthews. And wouldn't you know it, he scored 2 goals against the New York Islanders on Saturday, and then, of course, surpassed Matt Sundin to become the Maple Leafs all-time scorer. He's now got 421 goals in his career. So he broke the record in more than 300 fewer games played with the Leafs as well. So nothing to sneeze at there. Of course, he's now just 9 points away from passing Borje Salming to sit alone at 4th on the Maple Leafs all-time scoring list. So at the pace Matthews is at, Mike, do you think he'll go down as the best Maple Leaf of all time Is he already? I'm sure you have some thoughts on that. So I'm going to give you the floor.
Matthews is undoubtedly the most talented Maple Leaf player in history. That does not mean that he's going to be the best player of all time, because he needs to win a Stanley Cup. Or at least, Matt Sundin was in the conversation. He got to 2 conference finals. One of them he didn't play until the semifinal against Carolina in 2002. He was injured for most of that. But, the players that are ranked as the best players in Maple Leaf history are the Dave Keons or the Frank Mahovliches or the Tim Hortons, who won 4 Stanley Cups. So, Matthews is undoubtedly going to break every offensive record. He'll probably be the leading scorer in Maple Leaf history. Maybe that takes him another contract. He's, I think, under contract for 2 more seasons after this year, and there's no guarantee he re-signs in Toronto, although I think they'll pay him the most. But he has to advance in the playoffs. And the thing is that hockey is not an individual's game. I mean, Connor McDavid, even by himself, couldn't get and win the Stanley Cup. So Auston Matthews, who has turned it around over the last couple weeks and has become more of the Auston Matthews that we've seen in the past, scoring 5 goals in 2 games against Winnipeg and the Islanders. If he keeps playing like this, he'll break the all-time scoring record probably within the body of this current deal. But he's got to do it in the postseason when it counts to be considered the best all-time Leaf.
Adam, you agree?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can pass a former Vancouver Canucks legend on a list is pretty special. But yeah, I mean, same with what Mike said. If you have a history, it's like with Montreal as well. Unless you can win Stanley Cups, you can't be considered the best player in franchise history. When you have that history, if he wins 1, then that conversation starts. But until, he doesn't need to go out and win 5, or he doesn't need to go out and win 4. He just needs to win 1. And I feel like that's a conversation we have with a lot of players who belong to original 6 franchises. I don't know, somebody like Axel Sandin Pellikka with Detroit could be the greatest defenseman in their history, win more Norris trophies than Nick Lidstrom. But if he doesn't win a cup, then that conversation doesn't happen. Is he the best player in franchise history, right? So it's a little bit more difficult when your franchise has that history of Stanley Cups, but all it takes is 1, right? And it has to happen in it has to happen in Toronto. But yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens when his contract is up in a couple of years as well.
And Emma, we know that, in sport, it's always, recency bias is always a big thing. If, Mark Messier is probably considered one of the greatest New York Rangers in history. Why? Because he won a Stanley Cup for the first time in 54 years in 1994. Now, does that mean he's better than Rod Gilbert or Brad Park or any of the other great Rangers? No, but he won a cup. Matthews has to win a cup to be considered one of the best or one of the best in Maple Leaf history. But like I said, I think he's the most talented player they've ever had.
Well, I'm sure that we could spend an entire episode talking about Auston Matthews, but we will move on for now here. Interesting debate that I'm sure we'll be revisiting in the future. But for now, Adam, I want to go back to you because this is a player that we've talked about before when you've been on the show. Of course, Kiefer Sherwood did reportedly get an offer from the Vancouver Canucks, according to Elliot Friedman over the weekend. He did say, though, that there is a sizable gap between both parties on terms of a deal. So Sherwood, of course, 30 years old. He's having a career year by a long shot. He's leading the team with 17 goals in Vancouver. He's got 21 points, 41 games. He's in the final season of a 2-year contract, and he's only making $1.5 million a year. So he is due for a very sizable pay raise here. So Adam, with the trade rumors that were circling earlier in the season around Sherwood, are you surprised that the Canucks offered him an extension? And do you think that he ultimately will stick with Vancouver, or is he going to be traded?
So there is a report out of Vancouver that the Canucks basically upped their offer. So in the summer, their offer was $3 million, around there, $3 million. And I think it was 3 or 4 years. It's kind of hard to nail down exactly what these deals, what these offers are, but the new report out of Vancouver is that that they've upped their offer to $4 million around there. Not sure about term, probably in that 4-year range. But like this Vancouver team needs to figure out what they're gonna what they are. Like we've heard every form of rebuild, retool, hybrid build, whatever you want to call it. Like they need to also face a little bit of reality here. Like if they want to, like, are they going for the playoffs? If not, why are you keeping a player like Kiefer Sherwood when you can get even like a second round pick and a prospect? Like I know that they're asking for a first round pick and a prospect back for Sherwood, which makes sense based off of what we've seen those deals. But like it doesn't make sense based off of where they are. Like you want to keep Kiefer Sherwood because he's great in the room. Braden Coots at training camp raved about him. The players in that locker room love him. Like when I do interviews with players, Sherwood's behind me, like in the corner, like trying to make players laugh. Like you want that type of energy in the room. He's a hit machine. Like, I mean, he set the NHL record for hits in a season. He's scoring goals as a third line winger, essentially. So like if Vancouver wasn't in this position, then yeah, you sign him, but like it doesn't make sense. So I don't know what to make of this latest rumor. Like we saw it kind of with for people in Vancouver, we saw this with Bo Horvat a couple years ago, where they like kind of lowballed him on offers, and then we're like, oh, he's not accepting, we have to trade him. So I don't know if that's the same kind of idea that they're going with here, where it's like, because Sherwood's going to ask for 5, like based off of Wennberg and Dvorak's contracts. Like I know he's not a center, but Sherwood's going to get $5 million on the open market. I think like that's, or somewhere around there. Like I think that's kind of a foregone conclusion. So yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense what's going on right now. But, like you need to trade him. Like we're at the point where they're far enough out. I know they're going to keep saying that they're trying for the playoffs, but in reality, they need to start accumulating assets, and Sherwood is one of the best ways to start doing that.
Mike, what do you think here? Do you agree with Adam that the Canucks need to trade Sherwood? And what kind of value is he going to be worth on the market?
Well, I mean, I think you play it out in terms of waiting till just before the Olympic break. I don't know if you want to wait until March the 6th, because I think a lot of business is going to get done before the Olympic break. And at that point, teams may have expended most of their assets in terms of that. I mean, this is a guy who most teams and contenders would want, a guy who hits a ton. He can fit under their salary cap. He scored, I think he has 17 goals right now. He has scored double figures in goals the last 3 seasons. I mean, if I'm Vancouver, I'm like, before I trade you, Kiefer, how about we'll offer you that deal in July? We want to get the assets. And then July 1st, that deal's on the table. If you want to come back here, there you go. We get what we want. You get what you want. And you go have a chance to win a Stanley Cup with Dallas or Colorado or somebody. Other than that, if you're forced to overpay him now and not get the assets, I say I'm taking the assets. See you later. Because honestly, you look from an outside perspective, Vancouver is in Buffalo tonight. I looked at the roster. This team is 2 or 3 years from being a playoff team. They've made a great deal for Quinn Hughes, but I don't think they have enough talent there to really put it all together. So if I can get a first round pick for Kiefer Sherwood, I'm driving him to the airport.
I will point out, so January 30th, Bo Horvat traded. January 31st, Elias Lindholm traded to Vancouver. January 31st, JT Miller traded from Vancouver. So there's a pattern. 3 straight years. Could this be the 4th?
Jim Rutherford's allergic to February.
Interesting. Well, everybody circle January 30th and 31st on your calendars right now. Expect a Kiefer Sherwood trade possibly to happen around then. All right, moving on. Of course, lots of teams going to be looking to add to their rosters at the trade deadline. Teams looking for scoring, even a team that surprisingly has, fallen out of playoff contention recently. The Winnipeg Jets are reportedly looking to add some options, add some goal scoring to their team. Of course, they've fallen to last place in the league standings, 22nd in goals per game. Really a long way to fall since last year and the incredible breakout season that they had. So the Jets' top line has been really productive, but really nobody aside from Gabe Vilardi, Mark Scheifele, and Kyle Connor has more than 7 goals on that team. So, Mike, any options that stand out as potential targets for the Jets to trade for this year, just given where they are in the standings right now?
Well, if you look at the standings, I believe they're double figures in points behind the second wild card. They have no chance of winning a top 3 spot in the Central Division. I would question Kevin Cheveldayoff about being that wise to make a deal if it's a short-term deal. If it's somebody who has term on his contract, then that makes sense. And, you can trade young assets or draft picks to get those players. But if it's somebody to help you out this year, I think that makes no sense. I mean, they should look west to a team like Vancouver, who reportedly, they're talking about trading Connor Garland, or, I don't know if I buy into the Jake DeBrusk stuff, but, there are teams out there that are trading veteran players who have term on their deal or years of control. I mean, you could talk to Toronto about a couple of their players. Max Domi probably would be, his dad played in Winnipeg. Maybe he wants to play in Winnipeg too.
Adam, what do you think? Anyone stand out to you as a potential target for the Jets?
I don't know. I think that the Jets might need to upgrade their center position a little bit, just because Jonathan Toews hasn't worked out the way that they thought he was going to. But the Jets I feel like the Jets are, we talk about the St. Louis Blues from 2019. When it's like a team is really far out of the playoffs and it's like, can they pull a 2019 Blues? I think that if any team is capable of doing that, it's the Jets, just because their team is just so stacked. And I feel like they're maybe 2 pieces away from their kind of resetting on this. But also one of the big problems with the Jets is that somebody told me this the other day, where they have 2 drafted players from the last 9 drafts on their roster. That doesn't make a decade, and you have 2 draft picks that make your team. So, and they don't really have much coming up in the farm that can be, impactful top 6 players. So it's also kind of hard to figure out who's on the trade market, because there's so much parity in the league. But I think that if you're looking, if a team starts to slip and a second line center becomes available, I think that the Jets throw everything they can to get that and boost up the middle.
Well, Adam, you brought up Jonathan Toews, so I want to circle back to that as, part of maybe a bigger conversation here, because, a lot of teams, of course, made additions, whether it was through trades or free agent signings in the off season. We're now halfway through the year. So kind of looking at any of the additions, maybe big or small, that teams have made. Mike, I'll ask you first. Which GMs do you think are having buyer's remorse, just based on the production that they've gotten from a player that they acquired during the offseason through a trade or a signing?
Well, I would like to say in the East, I got one in the East, one in the West. I would like to say Nikolai Ehlers, but he has turned it on the last week or so. So he's starting, maybe it took him a half season to sort of get acclimated to Carolina. But the Maple Leafs were depending on Matias Maccelli to come in and not replace all of a certain player, his offense, but, maybe 45 to 50 points. And he has really not performed up to the expectations of Brad Treliving in Toronto. In the West, I would definitely like to say Mitch Marner, but I can't do that. But I just had to mention his name. But the player that clearly has disappointed is Andrew Mangiapane in Edmonton. I mean, to the point that they're healthy scratching him. He's got another year in his contract. If they could give him away, I think they would probably do it. It's an open secret out there. Everybody's reporting they're trying to trade him. And when that's the case, then essentially they're trying to get anything they can for him. And it's going to be tough because he's got another year left in his contract and he's just he's not fitting in with Edmonton. I think he probably fits in well, better someplace else.
Well, Edmonton, I'm sure, is also having buyer's remorse about a certain goaltender who they traded for in season, who has since gotten injured. So definitely not good times in Edmonton right now. Adam, anyone else stick out to you as someone who's maybe giving their GM buyer's remorse after the offseason moves?
Well, I'm going to go with Edmonton, but I'm going to change the criteria a little bit. And I'm going to say buyer's remorse based off a contract that a re-signing contract that was given to a new player on Edmonton, and that's Trent Frederick. He only played, I know that he played in the playoffs last year, but you're paying $3.85 million for the next 8 or 7 years after this contract for a player that has 3 points in 41 games. And there's rumors now that is Frederick going to be like a cap dump? Because we know Edmonton's cap is going to look very interesting next season with McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, Nugent Hopkins taking up 40% of the cap or whatever it's going to be. So I think that $4 million, almost $4 million for the next 7 season for a Trent Frederick who he's not 30 yet, but he's going to be 35 when the contract expires. It's gonna, I get that it's gonna go down a little bit, because the cap, but I mean that's a deal that's really burning Edmonton right now for sure, especially because they're looking to add players, but they have no cap space.
Man, just really rough times for the Oilers right now. This wasn't even supposed to be an Oilers topic, but it kind of turned into one here. So, definitely, I think plenty of examples there to go around. Want to shift gears a little bit here, though. Head over to Columbus. So, Jet Greaves quietly having a very good season with the Blue Jackets. He's got a .910 save percentage, 2.64 goals against average through 28 games this year. However, on the other hand, Elvis Merzlikins has been struggling. He has an .877 save percentage, 4.04 goals against in 14 games. So, Mike, do you think Greaves is the definitive new number one in Columbus, despite the fact that he's young? He's only 24 years old. And if so, what does this mean for Merzlikins in his future?
Well, I think buyout is a very possible situation with Merzlikins. I mean, he has just not played well the last few years. It's not just a blip. It's not just a one-year thing. He has been bad for 2 or 3 seasons. And it seemed to go hand in hand with him getting that new contract where he's making over $5 million. I think they depended on him to be like the assumptor of the throne of Sergei Bobrovsky, and he hasn't been anywhere close to that. Greaves had a great year in the American Hockey League last year and came up late in the season and almost got the Blue Jackets into the playoffs. They're at the bottom of that ridiculous group in the East, where if they win 4 or 5 games, they're right in the wild card. So they have Greaves to thank for that because he, as you said, he has played very well and he's played 28 games, which I don't think anybody would have expected him to play 75% of the starts for the Blue Jackets. So they're going to probably ride him and he'll play 55 to 60 games and they'll have to hold their nose when Merzlikins plays his 20 to 22.
Yeah, Adam, what do you think? Buyout inevitable here, or is there another option for them going forward with Merzlikins?
Well, there's always options because teams will always take chances on goaltenders. We've seen it in the past, but yeah, it's what Columbus does in the future is going to be very interesting. Big day for Columbus. They hired Lawrence Gilman, who lots of experience in the NHL, one of the quote unquote computer boys, one of the first people who really took that step in analytics and to help build teams. They just signed Igor Zamula, who had his contract terminated. So yeah, big day in Columbus. But I mean, Jet Greaves is a great story. One of those players that really worked for his opportunity. But I mean, if Columbus retains salary, somebody will take Elvis Merzlikins. There's enough injuries to goaltenders that teams want to be prepared. Like you look at what's happening in Anaheim, they have kind of like they have to have extra goaltenders because their goaltenders keep getting injured. Carolina is a great example. Like Frederick Anderson, we don't really know what his future is going to look like. It feels like every month there's a different Carolina Hurricanes goaltender that's getting injured. So I like Igor Shesterkin got injured last night for the Rangers. So it really is like even if you have to retain salary and Merzlikins ends up in the AHL somewhere, some team will take an opportunity on him just to have that, NHL credible goaltending where if there's an injury, you can bring him up for a couple games if he's past the point of being a NHL backup.
Well, one NHL team who should be feeling pretty good right about now about the future of their goaltending is the Detroit Red Wings. So their top goaltending prospect, Sebastian Cossa, won his second consecutive Goaltender of the Month award in the American Hockey League this season. So he's the first goaltender in franchise history to do that. He's currently got a .938 save percentage, a 1.67 goals against average in 18 games with the Grand Rapids Griffins. He's played just one game in the NHL since being drafted 15th overall back in 2021. So obviously not a current cornerstone piece of this Red Wings team, but definitely one they're looking to for the future. Mike, with looking at their goaltending situation in Detroit, with the ways that, Cam Talbot and then John Gibson have struggled, do you think it's time to give Cossa a shot at the NHL level?
Well, right now, Detroit is in a playoff spot. They're having more success than I expected them to have this season. The veteran tandem of Gibson and Talbot have worked for them. They both have save percentage under 900, but it's working for them right now. If they start to falter, then they might go to Cossa, whose goals against with Grand Rapids is under 2. He's 16-1-1 right now. So he's having a phenomenal year, and he's had 2 good years in the American Hockey League. So I look at it. Talbot's a free agent at the end of this year. He probably retires. He's 38 years old. Kossa's ELC is up at the end of this year, and Steve Yzerman can basically say, well, you haven't played in the NHL, so we're not going to give you a big contract. Maybe we'll give you a 2-year bridge deal at $1.5 million or $2 million. He's not going to pay big. He's going to say, you got to prove it to me. And if he wants to spend money in other places, it fits perfectly that Cossa moves in next year, Talbot retires, and then if Cossa stands on his head and is the number one, then he pays him. But I think this is a budgetary move and a overdeveloping, like Yzerman did in Tampa Bay. He liked to overcook his prospects, and I think this is that's what they're doing with Cossa here.
Adam, what do you think?
Well, Cossa, he's had the success since the WHL. Like the reason that we didn't really hear much about how good of a goaltender he was in the WHL is because he was on those Edmonton teams that kind of got screwed over by the pandemic. So like Edmonton built a team that was basically would have gone to the Memorial Cup probably 3 straight years. They only went once because 2 of those years were canceled. And Cossa was the goaltender there. But yeah, I mean, you have Cam Talbot, as Mike said, like his contract is up. John Gibson's contract is up, not this season, but after next season. So you have a perfect opportunity for Cossa to come in, learn behind Gibson, and then you can sign, if you want, you can sign Gibson to, a shorter term deal and have a 1A, 1B type situation. And having John Gibson as your mentor is a pretty good choice. I know that he has had a lot of injuries, but at one point he was considered one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. So, somebody to learn, like a experienced goaltender to learn from. You don't have to give him the keys right away, but yeah. And then you slowly basically make that transition where you go from a 1A, 1B type situation to Cossa being the 1 and Gibson being the 2. So, I mean, it's a good situation for Detroit, but they have to just make sure they don't re-sign Cam Talbot or bring in another goaltender that's going to block Cossa.
All right. Well, got to wrap up today, of course, talking about the World Juniors. Of course, Sweden taking home the gold medal in the World Juniors this year. But, a couple of standout prospects in this tournament, as there always are. Guys who, for example, Gavin McKenna was for a long time the projected number 1 overall pick in 2026. Still could be, but he's gotten a little bit of competition there now, I think. You've got McKenna, who of course won bronze with Canada. He had a goal and 3 assists in the bronze medal game. Overall in the tournament, he had 14 points in 7 games. But then along comes Ivar Stenberg. He won gold with Sweden. He had a goal and 2 assists in the gold medal game, 10 points through 7 games in the tournament. Mike, when you look at these guys and maybe any other prospects in general here, has the World Juniors performances from these individual players done anything to change your opinion about who goes first overall in the 2026 draft?
Well, I know that watching and speaking to people who know a lot more about the 2026 draft than I do, and I usually bone up on the draft in the month or two leading up to it. Everybody's saying, well, McKenna's stock is slipping. And I think it's ridiculous simply because, he struggled a little bit early on at Penn State, but he's playing against 21 and 22-year-olds, and he's thriving now. And he played very well at the World Junior. Now, Stenberg played for an absolutely loaded Swedish team, and that they won the gold medal. I don't know whether they would have won the gold medal had Czechia not taken out Canada, and Canada has had real trouble with Czechia over the last few years. It would have been nice to see a head-to-head matchup between the two, but in my mind, I think Stenberg is probably a top 3 or 4 player in this draft. And if somebody passes on McKenna at number 1, I wish I'm the team at number 2, because I'd take him every day, including Sunday.
Adam, you agree with that?
Well, one thing about, McKenna's playing in the NCAA, but Stenberg's playing in the SHL and dominating. So that is also very important to remember. With the World Junior, so when I've talked to scouts in the past, it's always, you don't completely change what you're thinking about a prospect based off the World Juniors. But what you do is you see how they react to certain situations. And it's more like, do you think that how is this player is going to behave in those tough situations? So we saw what happened with Gavin McKenna in the bronze medal we saw what happened to Gavin McKenna in the semifinals. He was pissed off. He got a game misconduct at the end of the game for, I think it was abusive official. That's not a great look on McKenna. Stenberg was one of Sweden's best players in the entire tournament, steps up in the gold medal game, scores that empty netter to end the game, basically. So, I mean, Stenberg, I feel like, hasn't gotten a lot of attention just because he has played over in Europe, and that's kind of what happens a lot of the time. Like, especially when you're in the CHL, you get a lot of attention with McKenna with Medicine Hat. But I mean, if you're looking also at styles, like McKenna is a perimeter player. So that's why people compare him to like Patrick Kane. That's kind of what they're looking at. But Stenberg is more of I'm going to take it to the middle. Stenberg is better overall because of the defense. McKenna has higher offensive upside. So I think it really depends on how you've built your team. Like, both are going to be potentially stars. And I think about like kind of if you remember back in the day, the Taylor-Tyler NHL debate, like who's going first, Taylor Hall, Tyler Seguin. Like, I think this might be the closest closest one that we see between 1 and 2 since then. Like, you can talk about Owen Power and Matty Beniers, but it's a little bit different, I guess. But like, it's really a coin flip between these two players. And I think that you're going to see a lot more draft lists coming out in the next little while with Stenberg at number 1 and McKenna at number 2. And then you'll have like Keen Verhoff at number 3. But I mean, yeah, it's like, you really can't go wrong here just based off of what we know. Like, obviously, you could look back in 10 years and say one is a bust and one isn't. But I think that that you're looking at 2 franchise-altering players, and you can't really go wrong with either one in the end.
Well, of course, if you want to read any more about what happened at the World Juniors, read ahead of the NHL draft in 2026, or read about any of the players, teams, topics we talked about today here on the Wraparound, of course, head over to the Hockey News. It's been the go-to for all things hockey since 1947. 12 issues packed with game and player insights, plus a free issue to start. It's a must-have for any fan. Head to thn.com/free and grab your subscription today. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Wraparound. Thanks so much to everyone who tuned in and listened to us talking some hockey today. As always, we really do appreciate it. We'll be back with an all-new episode on Thursday. For Mike Augello and Adam Kierszenblat, I'm Emma Lingan. This is the Wraparound, and we will see you next time.